Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport. Lewis Hamilton is the 80th different driver to be hired by Scuderia Ferrari to race in Formula 1. And it maybe wasn't the best Ferrari debut ever. But that got me thinking, what have other drivers managed on their Ferrari debuts? I'm going back almost 30 years to look at every driver who has made their debut in Formula 1 for Ferrari since 1996. Why 1996? Several reasons. Firstly, it was the debut of a certain German Ferrari legend. Secondly, 1996 was the last time Ferrari started the year with a completely new lineup. And thirdly, it's my channel and I'll do what I like. We are going to look at the Ferrari debut of the last 14 drivers to join the Prancing Horse, starting with the worst and working our way up to the best. And we'll see where Lewis Hamilton's Australia 2025 debut places him on the list. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and let's jump into the video. Luca Badoer. 10 years after he raced for Minardi and 16 after his Formula 1 debut with BMS Scuderia Italia in 1993, Luca Badoer got the call to race for Ferrari in place of the recently injured Felipe Massa. His debut was the 2009 European Grand Prix at Valencia, and it was a bit of a joke. He was last all throughout practice and qualifying, made a good start to the race but got tagged by Romain Grosjean, making his F1 debut, and spun to the back. He was slower than everyone else and finished 17th of 18th finishers. He was also caught speeding in the pit lane 4 times. He would make one more appearance at Belgium but was soon replaced and forgotten. His son Brando is now working his way up the single-seater ladder and may one day make his Ferrari Formula 1 debut. Hopefully he does better than his dad. Michael Schumacher. Yeah, Michael Schumacher may be the greatest Ferrari driver of all time, but he had a pretty poor start to his time with the Scuderia. After winning 2 championships with Benetton, he joined a Ferrari who hadn't won a championship for nearly 20 years. Williams were the team to beat, so it's not a surprise that Damon Hill and Jacques Villeneuve outqualified him. It might be a surprise that new teammate Eddie Irvine did though. Schumacher was let through by Irvine, couldn't catch for Williams, and ended the race after 30 laps with brake issues. Obviously, he went on to do much better things in red, but his debut at Albert Park in 1996 was a race to forget for Michael Schumacher. Giancarlo Fisichella, the other Italian to step in during the 2009 season. Giancarlo Fisichella joined Ferrari to replace Luca Badoer and finished out the season before his eventual retirement from Formula 1. Fisichella had just scored Force India's first points in an epic drive at Spa and now got his dream move to Ferrari, starting with his and Ferrari's home Grand Prix. Fisichella was still off the pace and not used to the Ferrari, but he adapted slightly better than Luca Badoer managed. He did crash in practice and he wasn't at the front of the field, but he was solid and he finished the race 9th. That was about his level for his entire half season at Ferrari, and he left Formula 1 after 2009 with 14 years and 3 wins behind him. Mika Salo. After previously racing for the likes of Lotus, Tyrrell, Arrows and BAR, Salo was probably just happy to get the call from Ferrari and probably wasn't all that fussed about where he finished. Called in to replace Michael Schumacher after he broke his legs at Silverstone, Mika Salo was respectable on his Ferrari debut at Austria in 1999. He qualified 8th and finished 9th, so it wasn't bad. He's down this low because he did make contact with Rubens Barrichello in the chaos caused by the McLaren's touching. The time lost from the damaged front wing sent him to the back. Whilst Mika Hakkinen put in the drive of a lifetime to get back on the podium after his first lap spin, Mika Salo was steadier, getting lapped and climbing back into the top 10, only after a bit of late race attrition. He did a good job for Ferrari in his 6 appearances and would go on to Sauber and Toyota, but his debut was as average as it gets really. Carlos Sainz Jr. After spending years of overperforming with the likes of AlphaTauri, Renault and eventually McLaren, Carlos Sainz Jr. moved to Ferrari in 2021 and made his debut in Bahrain. It was nothing special. He qualified in the midfield, spent the race in the midfield and finished in the midfield. The sole highlight of the weekend for Sainz was a double overtake on Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso, but he was some way off the pace of his teammate Charles Leclerc, miles off the front of the field, and just ended up having a quiet race to 8th place, exactly where he qualified. Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, I'm putting it down this low. What's the matter? You want to argue about it? Should it be higher? Well, okay, but it was a pretty uneventful debut for Lewis Hamilton. After all those years with Mercedes and now the start of his lifelong dream to drive for Ferrari, and his debut race starts by qualifying 8th, being stuck in 8th for the majority of the race behind the likes of Alex Albon and Yuki Tsunoda, and then getting caught up in a strategy blunder that leads to him finishing 10th, and he was lucky to get a point on debut. Due to the wet weather in Australia, it's hard to judge this one too harshly, but after all this time waiting and the hype around Hamilton's Ferrari debut, it was a damp squib of a result for the 7-time champion. Felipe Massa. Despite being quick from the outset and qualifying second, Massa's 2006 debut at Bahrain was a missed opportunity. He spun on lap 7 and almost took out Fernando Alonso, and a long stop to fix the car didn't help. But Felipe Massa clearly had the pace. He managed to fight back up to 9th, sadly in an age before the points went to 10th. He was also still a very young driver at the time, having only had 3 seasons with Sauber before moving to Ferrari, and his level of expectations was much lower than Hamilton's. Massa was coming in to be the number 2 driver to Michael Schumacher. Whilst the spin was embarrassing, everything else was out of his control, and when he was in control, he was fast. So overall, not a terrible debut for Felipe Massa. Oliver Behrman. When you really think about it, Oliver Behrman is the only truly inexperienced driver to make his debut for Ferrari in a very, very long time. Everyone else on this list has a few seasons of Formula 1 at least before they got into the Ferrari. Oliver Behrman made his Formula 1 debut in one. Apart from Charles Leclerc, Gianni Morbidelli was probably the last, and even he had a season with Minardi behind him. Gilles Villeneuve started his second Formula 1 race with Ferrari. Was the last driver before Behrman to make his Formula 1 debut with Ferrari really Arturo Mazzario? Doesn't matter. Oliver Behrman was called in on very short notice to replace Carlos Sainz after the latter got appendicitis last year. Brilliant drive to 7th, and it launched his Formula 1 career, now with Haas for his first full season. Charles Leclerc. Speaking of Charles Leclerc, after a good first year of Formula 1 with Sauber, he was moved up to Ferrari to replace the outgoing Kimi Raikkonen. He did a brilliant job over the course of his first year with Ferrari, finishing 4th overall and beating 4-time champion teammate Sebastian Vettel. His debut was likewise very good, qualified and finished 5th, just behind his teammate. This is just where Ferrari were at the time. They were slower than the Mercedes cars and Max Verstappen, and so Charles Leclerc performed at that level from debut, maybe even exceeding it at times. Rubens Barrichello. After 4 years with Jordan and 3 with Stuart Ford, Rubens Barrichello was brought to Ferrari to replace Eddie Irvine with the sole task of backing up Michael Schumacher and helping Ferrari to win their first driver's title since 1979, something he did admirably well, and that started from his Ferrari debut at Australia in 2000. Ferrari qualified behind the McLarens, but neither of the Silver Arrows made it to the end of the race, both hitting engine issues. For one blight to Barrichello's debut is he fell behind the Jordan of Heinz-Harald Frentzen and was stuck there for most of the race. Frentzen eventually retired from the race as well, and Barrichello followed his teammate for a Ferrari 1-2. I've put it lower on the list because Barrichello only finished second because both McLaren's and Frentzen's Jordan broke down, but this was the start of the Ferrari domination of the next 5 years, which Barrichello played a huge part in. Eddie Irvine. The Irish driver was always second fiddle to Michael Schumacher, except the second half of 1999 when Schumacher was injured. Occasionally, Eddie Irvine did get the better of Schumacher, and their shared Ferrari debut at Melbourne in 1996 was one of those times. Irvine out-qualified his championship-winning teammate, and while Schumacher left him for dust in the race, Irvine finished, Schumacher did not. Eddie Irvine came home a long way behind the Williams pair, and even survived contact with Jean Alesi in a Benetton to finish on the podium and score Ferrari's first points of 1996. Michael Schumacher went on to win 3 races in 1996, Eddie Irvine did not win for Ferrari until 1999. So to be clear, the German was definitely better than the Irishman, just not at Albert Park in 1996. Sebastian Vettel, the 2015 Australian Grand Prix, qualified 4th and finished the race in 3rd ahead of Felipe Massa, ran trouble-free unlike teammate Kimi Raikkonen, who had no end of trouble. Again, this was just very much Ferrari's place at the time. They didn't have a car to challenge Mercedes, and the best they could hope for was to be ahead of Red Bull and Williams. Sebastian Vettel had just come off a tough final season with Red Bull, where he had fallen off from his title-winning years, and the first couple of years at Ferrari were more like the Vettel of old. A steady but healthy start would be nothing like the roller coaster that was his 6 years with Ferrari in Formula 1. Fernando Alonso. I think many racing fans think Alonso should have accomplished more than he did. After his rise with Renault, he destroyed his career with a tumultuous time at McLaren and a return to a much weaker Renault team. Joining Ferrari in 2010 was meant to be his salvation, and despite never winning the championship, he still made clear he was a quality driver. Especially on debut, the 2010 Bahrainian Grand Prix, Fernando Alonso started the race 3rd, but moved ahead of teammate Felipe Massa and passed leader Sebastian Vettel when the future Ferrari driver's exhaust problems caused the Red Bull to lose power. Fernando Alonso led home a Ferrari 1-2 on his debut and began his 2010 campaign in style, losing out to Vettel at the final round. Kimi Raikkonen, the best Ferrari debut in the last 30 years, is from the Finnish superstar Kimi Raikkonen, who had the perfect start to his time at Ferrari with a pole position start, leading the majority of the race, lapping his teammate and taking the flag at Australia in 2007. The last time a Ferrari driver won the driver's title. Incredible stuff from Raikkonen, much better than his second Ferrari debut on his return to the team in 2014. He only managed a 7th at Australia, and even that was probably good enough for top 5 or 6 on this list. But it was that young, hungry Raikkonen after his time at Sauber and McLaren that came to Ferrari and won his first race that goes to the top of the pile on this list. So they are the last 14 debutants for Ferrari in Formula 1 over the last 30 years. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Would you move any of these higher or lower on the list? What do you think about Lewis Hamilton's first start in red? Make sure you subscribe for more motorsport. Thank you very much for watching and have a good one.